Namaste, Namaskar, Vanakkam or Suswagatam ab Sabiko to our esteemed guests, online listeners and viewers. It gives me immense pleasure to welcome you to the 15th episode of Pustakalok Light of a Book, a facet of the Navdhara series which focuses on book discussions. Today, our discussion is centered on the book authored by Sri Krish Govender ji titled Finding My Family. This discussion is brought to you by the Swami Vivekananda Cultural Center of the Consulate General of India in Durban, South Africa. We would like to begin by extending our thanks to Dr. Chaitanya Prakash Yogi ji, the director of the Swami Vivekananda Cultural Center, for the propagation of Indian culture and for this wonderful initiative in particular. I am Keshav Das, your program director for this episode. Allow me to introduce our esteemed and respected guests on this episode, Sri Krish Govender ji, Srimati Julia Aronowitz, Colonel Sri Logan Peter Govender ji, Dr. Sri BP Singh ji, along with IT specialist Sri Shashil Manna and Sri Sipiwe Mtungu. We will begin with a short foreword by the author Sri Krish Govender ji. Mr. Govender is a qualified educator in mathematics and computer science. He also completed an honors degree in management and a master's degree in business science. He specializes in information technology, research, business development, and project management. He is the author of 6 books and is currently working on his 7th. His books have traveled the world with readers from England, America, the Middle East, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, Swaziland, and all over South Africa. His books have been launched at the Apartheid Museum and at Lylesley Farm, Place of Liberation. Welcome, Mr. Krish Govender.
Thank you, colleagues and the host. I really appreciate that introduction. That was very good. And as the host said, I'm Krish Govender, local author, and I wrote a book called Finding My Family. This was my first book. As an author, I started writing pretty late in my life, but the advice is you don't have to be old and wise to write a book. I know some people that are very young that are authors, so the younger you start, the better. I enjoy, for many years, I was an avid reader and I used to read books. One of my favorite places as a child was the local library, and I used to spend many hours at the library reading as much as I can. And when I decided to write a book, it was more out of doing it for a bucket list. And I printed a few copies and I shared it with friends and family, and the response was, wow, this is really good. And that was the start of my first book. And I printed another set and reprint, and to date there's been 4 reprints of my first book, Finding My Family. The book is doing exceptionally well. It won an award. It was the runner-up for the One City One Book and many other awards. It won a Quail Award as well, so I'm very proud of that. The book is a very simple book. It's based in Durban. The reason I chose Durban as a city, because whenever I read books, it promotes many other cities. And I said, okay, why can't we write a book about Durban promoting our city? So the entire book is based in Durban. Local readers really enjoy it because the reality level is very high and they can be very familiar with the places like the Durban beachfront and the malls in Durban and the Valley of 1,000 Hills. So those are all places in the book. And it's a very simple story of a very successful businessman that he is very successful, and he thinks he's very successful because he was able to do this all on his own. And when he gets an invite to go back to his school, he's very reluctant, but something in him makes him go back. And when he goes back, he meets his principal, the principal from his primary school, and the principal sits him down and reveals to him exactly who he is, who his mother and father were, and what they went through to ensure that he is very successful. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is just the beginning of the book. And there's much more to the book. But as every author will tell you, I don't want to give you the entire plot. That will just spoil it. Thank you.
Thank you, Shri Krish Govender for the insight into the book and for the opening synopsis. I now welcome Srimati Julia Aronowitz. Mrs. Julia Aronowitz has worked for many years as an administrator and then moved on to supervising students in a learning academy. She also worked as a transcriber for various public meetings and a recruitment company. Mrs. Aronowitz has proofread, typed out many book manuscripts, and is an avid reader. Julia Aronowitz G, although past her official retirement age, spends her days not only reading novels, but since English language is such a passion of hers, she enjoys proofreading manuscripts and had the pleasure of reading all of Mr. Govender's books. She believes knowledge is a powerful thing and continues to study courses in life. She also enjoys helping others, and to that end is a staff member of an NPO that delivers a detoxification program. Welcome, Mrs. Aronowitz.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate the privilege of being able to talk on this show. Now, Mr. Krish Govender has already outlined his book, Finding My Family. What appealed to me is that I enjoy books that have human interest. And Finding My Family is just such a book. Now, the books are being written with young scholars in mind. And I think it is absolutely perfect for young readers, but also for oldies like myself. I thoroughly enjoyed the book. What I liked about it was the simplicity. Krish Govender's style is very simple and very good to read. And he has also included a glossary. So he's put words that are not always commonly used. So a young reader will have the opportunity of learning a new word and getting the meaning of it. In addition, he's also put a question and discussion chapter at the end of each chapter. So the students can be quizzed on what they've got from the book. So it shows that they have really understood what they read, which is very important because it keeps the interest up, especially for young people who are just starting out to learn or to read. There is also the storyline is very interesting and has a lot of human features to it. And it's simple and very well set out. When I started reading it, I became completely engrossed in it. And my reaction as I went through the rest of the books was like, I want to know more, more, more. Each book creates an interest, which really captures people's, the readership. And while I was going through them, I was thinking, how could this trilogy end? And I thought, well, maybe this, maybe that. And when I came to the end, it was like, wow, well done, Krish Govender. That was an absolutely amazing ending. It just put the polish to the whole trilogy. I can't enthuse enough about his books. Krish Govender and I have been friends for many, many years. And a couple of years back, he said to me, he wants to write a book. I thought, oh, come on, Krish, what the heck is Krish going to write about? And I must say he's really done himself proud because, as he said, the books are catching on people, young people, old people, people of all cultures, people in different countries are all enjoying these books. And I think also having a South African based, for me, makes it more interesting because we so often read books about other countries, other places. So having a book with local flavor is really very appealing. So when I was just reading through the books, what came out very clearly to me was Krish Govender's personal character, because the storyline was simple, basic, and it just gave a good impression of who Krish Govender is. I just admire him greatly. I'm one of his fans. So things that I enjoyed in the book were the theme of how he started off with the young boy at school, what had happened to him in life, how he succeeded in life, and then it grew on further to how he actually met his mother, and the stories with his mother, and the ending. Well, like I say, the ending was of the trilogy is something else, so everybody will be keeping high interest. So you can be assured that I will recommend the books big time. And what is also so important is that to capture the interest of people, to get them to read when they're young, because youngsters nowadays don't always get into reading something good, and they don't know what they're missing out on by not actually sitting down and reading a book that is interesting and well written. Because when you're reading, it's not only educational, but it's peripheral in that it can take you to places like going on a magic carpet ride of fantasy and faraway places. So that is what I would like to say. And in conclusion, I'd like to thank the Consulate General of India for promoting literacy in our country, and also for having this opportunity of expressing my views. Thank you.
Thank you, Srimati Aronowitz, for your thoughts on the book. I now welcome Colonel Logan Peter Govender to share his contribution towards the discussion. Colonel Logan Peter Govender is a retired South African Police Services member. He has over 30 years of active service in the SAPS. He has a BA honors degree and many certificates of service under his belt. With humble beginnings from the small town of Mzinto, he was able to become a high-ranking official at the SAPS headquarters in Pretoria. An active community member, Colonel Govender also strongly believes and has a strong feeling about civic issues and works to provide conditions and improve the environment. He has high praise for local authors and has read all of Krish Govender's novels. He believes that education is the literacy, is the key to success. Welcome, Colonel Govender, please.
Thank you, Mr. Das, for that wonderful introduction. When I first read Finding My Family by local author Krish Govender, it could have easily passed as the work of an acclaimed author who has published many books over the years, only to find that it was the writer's first book, and that of a local South African writer who grew up in a little rural town called Mzinto, surrounded by sugarcane in the KwaZulu-Natal South Coast. The writing style is simple, but brilliant in terms of how the story developed. I got easily drawn into the storyline of the book because, like the main character, Siboniso, I found myself over the years going back to my primary and high school to say hello to my teachers and keep in contact with my classmates. We all do that these days. Krish's writing style, use of language and grammar makes the book compatible to any reader, irrespective of age and across any culture or social barriers. It was difficult to put down, I must admit. Readers or any audience can easily identify with the characters portrayed within its pages. Like I said earlier, the plot easily draws the reader into the story as it contains memories of one's own childhood in the school setting through primary and high school, university, and then onto the working environment. I must confess, though, that reading was not one of my strengths. During my schooling days, if I could have gotten a screen adaptation of our school set books, I would have. I only developed a keen interest in reading when I entered the tertiary environment and then thereafter. I thought I had done away with reading novels, as I was now a police officer, reading and developing policy particularly on gender-based violence issues. My mind was taken away from reading novels for almost 30 years before Krish's books were introduced to me. From the moment I opened the first page of Finding My Family, all that hidden love for reading surfaced. A passion for reading I never thought I had. Don't ask from where it came from, but it just appeared. I guess I found the storyline and language of the book interesting. Never too late to read, I told myself. It's a pity though this book is only printed in English, and a higher population of this country speaks other languages. This is an international book that belongs in every school library. I could only hope that one day the pages of this book be in all official languages, not only in South Africa, but in Africa and abroad. India will love this book and the storyline, as the author's great-great-grandfather was from India. Like I said earlier, I'm not one for spending time reading a novel, but Krish's books even had me competing time with my wife, who was waiting to watch Netflix series together. I remember after reading just the first chapter of Finding My Family, I called the author and said, Krish, kids in school must read your book. They will love and enjoy it. Finding My Family drew me to wanting more of the story. So the long wait for the second part, Losing My Family, came along, and it did not fail to please the appetite for a good plot. This book took me deeper into the lives of the character and put us on the front row of this beautiful story set during the apartheid South Africa. Writing was good and so close to the works of great novelists we read at schools that it was scary. The hype around the third part of the trilogy, Fighting for My Family, has been unprecedented. I got my hands on a copy and completed it. Just like Julia, I've had the privilege of reading all three books. I told Krish that if he writes like this, he needs to pen more books. We can only say congrats, Krish Govender, a farm boy who has done it again. I just want to place my record to the Consulate General of India for affording us this opportunity to talk about Krish Govender's book. It's exciting to know that a local author, a farm boy, has written such a great book, and the grammar is amazing. The elderly can read it, the young generation can read it. It's enjoyable. The story is exciting. You can't wait to read the second part and the third part. Hopefully one day we'll see a screen adaptation of this movie. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Colonel Govenderji, for your contribution. I now would like to welcome Dr. Bhuvan Prakash Singh ji to share his contribution. Dr. Singh ji is an author and former educator with a career in education spanning over 15 years. Dr. Singh ji has a Bachelor of Arts honors degree and a master's degree in business administration and a doctorate in public administration. In 2005, he transferred to the KZN Department of Sport and Recreation as a Deputy Manager for Communication, and now continues to serve the KZN DSR as the Deputy Manager for Policy, Planning, Strategy and Research. Welcome, Dr. Singh ji.
Namaskar to all our online audience in the first instance, as well as to our erstwhile panelists, Logan, Julia, Krish, and of course to my good friends, Sipi Veji, Keshav, Sushil, and to Dr. Prakash Yogi. Thank you for the opportunity of being part of this discussion panel. And of course, congratulations at the outset goes out to Krish Govender, who's become a good friend telephonically, for an excellent piece of writing. And a lot of what needs to be said about the book has been mentioned already by my three panelists. So I'm going to confine, as far as possible, my comments to the literary value of the book. In terms of the storyline, yes, this is a story of a young man who finds out that he's not an orphan. And that lends credence to the title of the story. Of course, the manner in which he finds out is what the reader needs to find out through reading the book, of course. I'd like to mention that in terms of the genre, it is a fictional story, but it's based on the realities of South Africa. And that makes it very relevant to this day and this age and this society. And of course, more broadly, to any society throughout the world. The character of Sibaniso is a typical millennial South African young man who's born with opportunities that people in the past, pre-apartheid, never had. And of course, he's very, very successful. A lot of his success can be contributed to the fact that he's a bachelor, he lives alone, he's got no family commitments. He doesn't seem to have anything that actually holds him back or holds him down. And that, of course, makes the story even more poignant when at the end of it, he finds that he does have roots that are deeper and that have, of course, some linkage to him. In terms of the writing style that Krish has used, this has already been mentioned, of course, by Julia. It's a very easy going, very simple form of writing, such that in terms of effectiveness, it's very, very engaging. And it is true that this book would appeal to people across all ages. And I think the simplicity of reading is what will promote the issue of literature in this country. I think we all know there is a challenge with people not reading as much as they should. And this book could be a critical tool in that space. Of course, it being based in a place like Durban, where many of us hail from, and we relate to the sights and sounds and the venues that are mentioned, it brings the story home. And I would not call Krish Govender a local author. I'll call him a South African author, because I'm very averse to the fact that when we use the word local, sometimes it kind of redeems or reduces the value of our writing. And this book is definitely not in that space. It can be put, with many of the other classics around the world. Of course, this book, I think it's actually been formatted for school, because as Julia has mentioned, at the end of every chapter is a set of questions that learners in particular can use to engage with, to find out whether they comprehend the story, and of course, interact with the story itself. Together, of course, with a glossary of terms at the end. And the glossary is very important because that brings in the educational aspect of the book. There's many reasons for writing a book and many reasons for reading a book. So I think this kind of formatting allows for the educational aspect of the book itself, and of course, the interactive aspects of it. I like, of course, the fact that there are no real names and surnames, first names and surnames mentioned in the first 60% of the book. So we only know Siboniso or as Siboniso, no surname, no identity, etc. And I think that's a critical tool in promoting the story, because the story is about identity. And it's only when Siboniso goes to school do we know that his surname is Mkhize. So the aspect of a lack of surnames would actually make every character and every man. And that allows for the applicability of the story to be broad-based and not really restricted to the very characters in the book itself. I did pick up a moment of amusement when I thought of Siboniso sitting in his car and having a pang in his stomach. And he's thinking, is that the mutton curry that I ate? Of course, it was anxiety in his stomach instead. So there are little gems like this that are placed throughout place in the book to give one a chuckle every now and then. And that, I think, is a piece of excellent expertise in the writing process. For me, the main things are the themes and the messaging of this book, and I'm just going to mention a few. The issue of the tragedy that befalls Siboniso's family with the bombing, for example. If you look at the South African society, and we know the history that we come from, but tragedy can be of any form and any source. And you'll find that in this instance, a tragedy divides the family. That is why Siboniso ended up being the so-called, often in inverted commas, that he thinks he is. And that bomb blast, of course, as mentioned in the book, is a tragic incident that helps to block out the nastiness of that incident, and of course, his entire past, of course, which comes back later on when his mom actually speaks to him about it. This book's also an issue of courage and sacrifice. If you think of Siboniso's father, who had the ideals for which he went abroad and promoted the South African equality system at Cambridge, but also came back and participated in the new democracy as a municipal manager. And you'd find that he lost his life because he's not happy with what he saw. Again, for me, a piece of literature and the discussions. And if you look at what happens in the country today, the issue of corruption, the issue of fraud, etc., in government in this particular instance, is very, very rife. And that is a theme that can be discovered very nicely and discussed very nicely in a classroom, because that incident happened in the new South Africa, not in the old South Africa. So it makes it very current. In terms of culture, Siboniso, having grown up grown up with his family in that private school, in an English medium school, he forgot his culture of the Zulu. And it is Tandi, of course, through her proud insistence of culture, allows him to become acquainted with his mother tongue. Again, this is the think point for all of us. How many of us are able to actually speak in our mother tongue? We're very fluent in English, yes. But what about the vernacular? And isn't that a matter of our identity and our culture? So the issue of identity is very important in this book through the issue of language, culture, and of course, the issue of name. Again, in terms of relevance to South African society, you know, Bono lives, or Siboniso lives in what's called an eco environment. And he doesn't even know his neighbor. He just knows his neighbor by the Maserati that he drives. Think about that in our everyday lives. We are surrounded by huge, high, thick-walled, you know, highly wired, electrified fences. How many of us know our neighbors? In this sense, I don't mean by name only, but how many of us do really know our neighbors? We are together, but cut off. And again, that's a reflection of the society we are in. So there's a little touch of it there with the Siboniso and his neighbors, but I mean, it's a great think point for us. Of course, the issue of preconceptions are here. All of us as human beings have opinions and we have preconceptions. And there are about 5 or 6 mentions when Siboniso thinks the school is just calling him because they want a donation. Again, this, you know, tugs at our heartstrings because many of us are like that. And we think that when people reach out to us, they definitely want something. Very seldom do we think they have something to offer instead. Again, that's a think point for self-reflection. So what I'm trying to say with these examples is that in looking at the character of Siboniso and the way he interacts with the world, we are forced to reflect on ourselves. And self-reflection is a very important benefit of reading. The issue of schools, you know, I'm an ex-teacher, and the issue of teachers being the second parents proves very true in this instance. When Siboniso goes back to school to find his family, it's not just his mother at the end and his father. His family were his teachers, Miss Joanna, the place he spent his time, that was his house, his household, etc. So actually, Siboniso has a dual family. The one that gave birth to him, of course, that he meets at the end of the book, but also the one that brought him up and made him the man that he was. And of course, if you look at the way teachers today are treated in society, at one stage it was a very honorable vocation to be in. Today is just another job. So what has changed? We still have teachers like the one that Siboniso thinks about and says, I feel a great loss because Joanna is not, Miss Joanna is not alive today. The other important point of this book is the issue of the history of our parents. How many of us really know our parents? We see them as providers. Dad goes to work and comes back. Mom cooks the food. Did they have a life of their own? And what was the contribution of their life in the larger scheme of things? And I think the moot point at the end of this is when Siboniso finds out that he's not an orphan, number one. Number two, that his parents were highly respectable. They were principled people, and they stood for a cause. They had their own history. And what do we do as people today? We think we make history. We are important. It's the I factor that comes in. And I think it's a very important point for us to know where we come from so we know where we're going and what legacy we need to leave. I just want to divert a little bit by here to saying that I written a book in 2010 called When the Chalk is Down, and that's dedicated to my parents because it covers their story. So for me, this is a very pertinent point and a moot point in this particular book itself. We all have a history that we cannot escape. With Siboniso, there's always the issue of hope. If you really analyze the entire book, you think his beginnings were so bad. How come he was such a success? And you find that these were contextual factors, and contextual factors in his case brought hope. A simple thing like planning in the morning. Siboniso plans his day and he says, when I plan my day, at the end of the day, I find that I had a very fruitful day. And on other days, I'm just fuffing and faffing. Again, that's a life lesson for us. The importance of planning to achieve and get what we want. Of course, he's been very successful through his diversity, and that means there's hope for all of us. If you look at the issue of opportunity, for example, Siboniso is portrayed as a very strong athlete. Then we analyze, how was this possible? And you realize that he had no other home beside the school, and after hours, when everyone else was gone home, he had access to the amenities and the facilities, and he had time. And unwittingly, or otherwise, he used the facilities and became very, very good at sport. Another point is, what's the impact of teachers on us? How many of us honor the alma mater? How many of us are in contact with our schools? Do we give back? Your schools are the backbone of the community. And I think this book brings it out very staunchly, that when there was no other family for Sibaniso, the school was his family, and it turned him out to be an excellent member of society. People, of course, fought apartheid in many ways, and the story of his parents come through there. I just want to conclude by saying that I like the conclusion of the book, because there are many questions that are unanswered. And the very fact that Sibaniso and his mom end up sitting under a tree, chatting, we don't know about what. We don't know things like, although the dad died, why didn't mom contact Sibaniso 5 years ago when he started working, when he was fired from his first job? Why did she wait so many years, possibly 8 to 10 years into his working life, to meet with him? These are basic questions that we have, but the answer lies in that silent discussion between them that we do not know about, and it keeps us guessing. And of course, that opens up the next aspect of the second book to come, or even the third book to come. So I just want to say to you that, Krish, you've done an excellent work from a literary point of view. Yes, the book should be studied at school level. It's formatted for that. It gives us many life lessons. And I want to wish you very, very well and all the best for your future books to come. I know you've written 7, and I'm sure there's more to come. Well, all the very best to you. And thanks to the panel for allowing me to be a member of it. Namaskar.
Namaskar. Thank you, Dr. Singh ji, for your wonderful perspective on the book. And thank you to all our respected and esteemed guests for your valuable participation in today's discussion. I would now like to hand you over to Shri Sipiwe Tsunu, who will render the vote of thanks.
Namaskar and greetings to all of you. On behalf of Swami Vivekananda Cultural Center at the Consulate General of India in Devon, it gives me a great pleasure to deliver a vote of thanks on today's 15th episode of the program, Pustakalok, meaning light of the book. Today's discussion was about the book authored by Mr. Krish Govender, titled Finding My Family. You know, I was so touched when I heard that some of the places that Mr. Krish Govender mentioned in this book, it is Devon, the place we are living in Devon, and also in North Beach in Devon. You know, thank you for selling our Devon to the world. So Mr. Krish, according to what I heard this evening, this book, it's a must to have, you know. So I saw this book bringing a smile to a senior citizen. When Miss Julian was speaking, you saw on the face that she really enjoyed the work of Mr. Krish Govender. So thank you very much for giving us this book titled Finding My Family. Now allow me to thank our online panelist, Mr. Logan Govender, for his wonderful remarks on the book, Miss Julian Aronowitz for her wonderful remarks on this wonderful book. I saw this face of Miss Julian, it was smiling, you know, she really enjoyed this wonderful book. And lastly, to Dr. Bhuvan Prakash Singh, thank you very much, sir, for sharing with us this wonderful book. To all of you, the author himself, Mr. Krish Govender, Logan Govender, Julian Aronowitz, and Dr. Bhuvan Singh, Danyavat, thank you very much for taking part on today's program. To Director of the Swami Vivekananda, Dr. Chaitanya Prakash Yogi, our Program Director, Mr. Keshav Das, our IT guy, Mr. Sashil Mana, thank you very much for taking part on this program. To all our online participants who took part on today's program, we'd like to say Danyavat for taking part and choosing to be with us this evening. You are kindly advised to visit ICCR in Devon Facebook page for all cultural updates in the Consulate General of India in Devon. Once again, to our online guests, thank you for taking part. To all of you, have a wonderful evening. Namaskar.